Alright guys, we are back on the Carrie Symonds, Boris Johnson's axe wound, or Princess Nut story, whichever you prefer, because more people are calling out the position she has put Boris Johnson in by removing Dominic Cummings and Lee Cain, essentially exposing him as a weak and feeble Prime Minister, unsure of himself and those around him, easily manipulated and led along even to his own destruction, which has been his course of action all year if I am honest. She has only turned more of Boris Johnson and the Tory party's own voters against them. You lot know this, as a lot of you are now against them for what they have done and plan to do. This will obviously come back to bite them in the arse, especially with all the new parties popping up that will suck votes from them. Right now, the only option for people pissed off with the main parties is to vote for anyone but the Tories, Labour, Lib Dems or SNP. Much like last year, it was anyone but Corbyn. But to top it off for the Tories, we all know Farage is back, and like I said, there are many other small parties out there, so people will vote for them. Carrie is only going to help these smaller parties take more votes from the Tories, but before we get into that, and following on from my Biden voter stream last night, I will be doing private Warzone Battle Royale matches for any Xbox, PlayStation or PC gamers out there who want to join me over on my gaming channel tonight at around 8 PM. The link will be down in the video description as always. But now let's get back to Princess Nutnuts and the crap that she has been pulling. It headlines Carrie Symonds will bring down Boris. She now faces wrath of Farage, Annabelle Sanderson says. To misquote Lady Bracknell, to lose one senior member of staff may be regarded as misfortune. To lose two looks like carelessness. Which obviously it does, and it's not that he lost them, it's that he allowed his missus to dictate who will be what and what will go on. That's not carelessness. I consider that to be nothing more than weakness. It goes on, but that is what has happened to the increasingly hapless looking Prime Minister in a feud which has aired the dirty laundry of number 10 to the public. When Dominic Cummings left via the main door of number 10 in the full media glare, it was clear this was not a happy ending, nor indeed the ending at all. As I said, we could well hear a little bit more from Dominic Cummings in the future, and I really hope we do. But whilst there may have been glee around Westminster and veritable gloating in the grey corridors of Brussels, there is no reason to assume that Boris's better half, Carrie Symonds, will win the day. No, I am sure she won't. Eventually, the people will turn against Boris and Carrie Symonds in greater numbers. This, if you ask me, is only a matter of time. She goes on, because what her actions have done is further weaken a Prime Minister who has already lost the confidence of many millions of the people who voted for him, even those who wrapped up in the freeze and weather to help campaign for him, something I have also seen myself. It's hard to see how he could muster that kind of support should there be an election tomorrow, even amongst his own MPs. Well, there won't be an election tomorrow, but I get the point. If there was an election tomorrow, the Tories would certainly have a very tough time of it. Most of the people who campaigned on their behalf last year certainly wouldn't be doing it, and many of the independent, unaffiliated voters who voted for him last year would also be non-existent in future elections. That I am almost certain of. To make matters worse, it goes on, the perpetual thorn in the Conservative side, one Nigel Farage, has announced that he already has more than 3,000 people signed up to be candidates for his newly named Reform UK party in next year's elections. Mr Farage may have never won a seat in Westminster, but there can be no doubt he is one of the most influential politicians of our age, and this new party, which is campaigning against the government's failed approach to tackling the Rona and yet more lockdowns, will take significant support from Boris, which is something we have seen in previous elections, including local and EU ones. It's just a shame that Nigel Farage backed down at the general election. We may well be in a different situation now to what we are. When I worked with Nigel Farage, despite what the media said about UKIP splitting the right-wing vote, our target seats and voters were always old Labour types, the very kind behind the red wall who helped the Conservative achieve last year's landslide. It wasn't that we split the Tory vote. In many constituencies, UKIP actually enabled them to win, which may be partially true, but UKIP also forced them to actually do what people wanted because they knew they were losing voters quicker than they could import more. Because at this point, it seems it's not only Labour who want to import voters, apparently the Tories want to do it as well. Now, she speaks about a bunch of shit there going on about the Tory party. I'm not really interested in that. It doesn't really help the article at all. It's just filler. She says here, though, now Princess Nutnut, the charming nickname for Miss Symonds adopted inside number 10, seems to have her manicured paws firmly on the tiller with her promises to the people via the blonde mouthpiece that is her fiancé Boris. She's promising lots of lovely new green policies when people are wondering if they will keep their jobs or their hospitals will manage to cope. Well, we all know the hospital bullshit is just that because we hear this same shit every single year, even when the Rona is not around. And saving the NHS is a Labour election manifesto policy every 5 years that the people of this country seem to ignore, except when the Tories try to use it. The red wall seats are unlikely to venture their cross back in the Tory box with that on the menu. You can guarantee that many of the red wall voters I have spoke to are never going to vote Tory again. And they may not opt for the rich, titled Londoner Sir Keir Starmer. No, they 100% won't, because as it says here, he was responsible for the disastrous Labour policy of a second EU referendum. Swathes of these voters hit by other calamitous membership of the EU voted to leave. And also, Sir Keir Starmer has not also just done that, he has been a complete shit show his entire life. Let's be honest here. I'm sure Labour don't want us to go into his time as Director of Public Prosecutions when the grooming gang scandal was at its peak. The article continues though, why would they return to vote for a party which essentially took their support for granted whilst publicly stating they were stupid or racist or both? Which is a perfectly valid point, as I'm sure you all know. We've called them out many times on this channel for doing the exact thing. But it is also forgetting there that the Labour Party hate the United Kingdom. That is another reason why people don't vote for them and never should again. It says here, the EU is delighted by Cummings' departure, with household names including the political eyesore that is Guy Verhofstadt hitting out at unelected bureaucrats. I know the irony is palpable, and German MEP Manfred Weber announcing the departure was a sign of the government losing direction. No, it's a sign of the government taking a new direction, and Brexit is really at risk now. He told Radio 4, whose editorial team must have been orgasmic at the news, don't tell us we, the EU, should be ready for compromise. Not that they were ever going to compromise, something we have said many times before. The EU doesn't do compromises, it only does bullying or bribing. It prefers the former, but in the case of its enlargement eastwards at the beginning of this century, bribery was certainly part of the diplomatic process. So does that mean we should be ready for Brexit in name only now that Dom has gone? Yes, this is something I said the other day is certainly possible, and it says here, whispers in Downing Street mentioned on these very pages have hinted that such an announcement may be imminent, which makes Nigel Farage's timing once again superb. The man is a campaigning machine with his finger on the pulse of the people, blah blah blah. We've all heard that shit before, I'm not reading through it again. It may be that just as some of the Tories are celebrating the departure of the Vote Leave Supremo, they have awoken the sleeping giant of Farage. His call to arms is for an alternative to pro-lockdown, pro-austerity options currently available. Reform UK, he proclaims, will lead the fight away from economic collapse and towards turbocharging growth. Carrie might think herself as Queen Bee of Downing Street, but it's unlikely she has got the guts or skill to beat Farage at what he does best. The underdog fighting for the support of the real people of this country. Well, I can tell you now it won't really be a fight because the people of this country are never going to support Carrie Simmons, or as I've heard her called now, Yoko Simmons, and I feel it's kind of fitting. But it is good to see even a paper like The Express, which generally supports the government through thick and thin, calling out their bullshit and the fact that Carrie Simmons is only going to drag down Boris Johnson even further than he was doing anyway, which I have to say makes me kind of happy because the guy is a complete tosspot at this point, and even more so if he's being a complete simp and letting her run the country when he should be doing it. No one elected her and no one ever will.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors, slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires. And that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going, and we are glad to be going. We're off.